welcome back to Environmental Science here at NICC. This introduction lecture here is for our climate change unit. For this unit, the expectation is that you will have read through chapters and sections 7.1, 15.4, 15.5, and 15.6. Reading through these sections should give you a pretty good basic understanding of the basic science and principles surrounding climate change and some of the ideas and controversies around anthropogenic climate change as we see it today. 7.1 really sort of covers just the basic functionality of how the energy system on our planet, driven by our sun, pushes energy into our global system, and then how that then cycles and moves through these broad climatic and sort of weather patterns, such as the jet stream and these convection currents as they as warm air rises and cool air sinks and moves throughout the atmosphere, and really works at moving this energy in these very predictable ways that we see as weather, and as this weather sort of accumulates over time, we see it as climate. When we're talking about anthropogenic or human-driven climate change, we're really talking about the changes in these climatic factors that are affecting not just the weather that we see, but also these long-term climate changes as well. 15.4 in your textbook is how and why is the Earth's climate changing. So it's really looking at how, again, these weather systems are changing over time. Again, this differentiation that weather is not the same as climate. So just because it's cold in the wintertime still in Iowa doesn't mean that this increase in global temperature is not occurring. It's simply changing these weather patterns. So that change in terminology from global warming to climate change, I think, has been conscious of this reality that indeed we still have cold weather in many parts of the world, but we are changing the Earth's climate over time. Figure 15.18 in the book has some really nice graphs sort of looking at these changes in temperature over these different time periods, and we can see very clearly that we are having this very steep upward trend in global temperatures in the very short term, that we don't see that as would be expected over these long-term climatic models, and over the long term when we're looking at the actual data. Most of the rest of the 15.4 really gets into sort of the nuts and the bolts of the greenhouse effect and how these changes, these human-driven changes in our environment, are changing these global responses to these greenhouse effect endpoints that we're seeing today. 15.5 in the textbook is what are the likely effects of climate change, and this goes into some of these impacts that we expect to see and that we are actually starting to see borne out around the globe, and not just in sort of far-flung places like the North Pole, but really we can tie these back to changes in how these weather systems are functioning in the United States, and even more regionally if you're taking this course in Iowa. So we see these changes occurring as human systems are driving these climate changes. We are seeing these changes occur right now. If we move north where there is permafrost, we start to see the melting of these ice sheets, the degradation of these permafrost resources. As we move towards more temperate climates, we see this increase in drought in areas. We can see that in these huge bushfires that we had down in Australia last year and this year, earlier this year at any rate, a year ago, whatever. We see that with the fires that we have in California, increased hurricane extreme weather events in the Gulf of Mexico. Even again more locally, we see in the state of Iowa that our rainfall total isn't really changed, but the intensity of the rainfall events has increased. So we get these huge dumps of rainfall followed by these long stretches of drought, rather than this very nice, easy sort of rain that's much more beneficial towards sort of quality habitat and growing crops and human functions, things like that. They also sort of start to tie in some of these ideas about how these changes in weather and climate can really have an impact on human systems. And when we're working through the case study that you guys have been assigned, I hope that that case study really helps to highlight this reality that these changes in climate have a real deep and driving impact on human systems. 15.6 in your book talks about some solutions to climate change, and really looking at sort of at very high level, sort of international issues to national issues, regional issues, all the way down sort of to the individual level, where we can really see that individuals are actually the level at which people can have a big impact on these climate change issues. And that's not to say that we can just ignore sort of federal responses or international responses to climate change, because those are certainly important, in changing these systems away from fossil fuel dependent systems is an important component, but also understanding that individual choices and individual values and things like that are important in driving this climate change conversation. All right, so again, that should get you covered for your reading for this first unit, this climate change unit. Again, it's going to be chapter 7.1, 15.4, 15.5, and 15.6 in your Cengage Environmental Science textbook that looks something like this. And that should get us through the first section for reading, and should help guide our discussions, your writing, and then how you guys are working through this case study for this section. All right, if you have questions, please feel free to ask those questions in the discussion forum. If you have a question that you'd like me to answer personally, feel free to email me, and I'll talk to you later.